Hello, and welcome to our second Sustainability Speakers Series event. I'm super happy to see a lot of you present for this event. My name is Emily Chanda, and I will be your host today on behalf of the Long Point Biosphere Region. So let's start right away with our land acknowledgement before we dive into the topic of social sustainability today. More people coming in. Fantastic. All right, so to start, let's take time to acknowledge that we are located on the treaty lands and the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credits First Nation and the traditional territory of the Neutral and Haudenosaunee peoples. The Long Point Biosphere Region stands in sovereignty on these treaty lands with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So very interesting topic today, but let's maybe start by introducing the biosphere so you can know a little bit more about us, what we do and what we stand for. So the Long Point Biosphere Region is a nonprofit registered charity. We partner a lot of people coming in here. So we promote research, monitoring, community outreach and educations, partnerships and projects that support goals of biodiversity, conservation, and sustainable communities in Norfolk County. We exchange information and collaborate with other Canadian Biosphere Reserve Association. Like in other reserve or biosphere all around the world. So our main mission here at the Long Point Biosphere Region is to collaborate to enhance ecosystem and community well-being, and while we unite people with nature. So let's start with talking about what sustainability is and why we invited you to join us on this event today. So if we go back to the very beginning of sustainability, in '87, the United Nations met up and the Brundtland Commission defined sustainability as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Very simple definition of what sustainability is, but so important. There are many pillars of sustainability. So environment is typically what we think of first off when we think about sustainability. The event 2 weeks ago had a big focus on the environmental piece, which is a large topic. So we were able to tackle a small section of the environmental pillar of sustainability. There is also the economic pillar and social pillar, which we will explore together today in this 1-hour webinar. So social sustainability is really a critical component of communities' well-being and longevity. You'll see that it's not necessarily something that we think about first when we talk about sustainability, but is so important. Social sustainability is largely neglected in the mainstream debates, but that's really a main reason why I wanted to bring this topic forward. There is a lot to talk about under social sustainability, and today we will tackle a small part of it with our experts that we invited to join. There is a lot to talk about. There is different perspective. There is a lot of component. So we'll try our best to explore at least an introduction to social sustainability together today. You may have seen this graphic before talking about the Sustainable Development Goals brought in by the United Nations. So this is really a collection of 17 goals that are designed for a sustainable future for all of us. And the UN intends to achieve these goals by 2030. There is a lot for us to do to achieve these goals. If you notice that the first row, the first colorful row, the first 6 goals, they actually focus on the social dimension of sustainability. A lot of it is, human rights is really the cornerstone. We're talking about hunger and poverty, well-being, health, equality, and so on. And those are really important, and we'll certainly address some of these sustainable development goals together today on this discussion. So we will have 2 speakers today. I will introduce our first speaker shortly. We will have a question period at the very end. So I left about 10 minutes at the end of this webinar to ask questions so we can engage and have conversations together. So if you have a question right away, you can certainly put it in the chat box, but we'll wait at the very end of the event to address the questions, where you'll have the option of asking with your voice, or again, chatting, using the chat feature to ask. So I'm really excited to be presenting our first speaker, Evette. Evette Stobo is an HR expert at Linden Road HR. It's a company that takes a coaching approach to HR work. Their focus is to create inclusive spaces for everyone to work in. Evette has 25+ years experience in this field, and through her career, she has seen so many cultures fall apart because people didn't feel a sense of belonging and inclusion. Her and her team are passionate about providing the help to change that, right? So let me come back here and invite Evette to come in and share a slide.
Hello. Okay.
Great.
There we go.
Perfect. Your slides are coming in.
Perfect. Did they all come in or just one?
Yeah, if you can move to presentation view, we kind of see all the sides. That should be. It's okay. We see them good enough. Let's
Doesn't
not.
matter. It's just
Doesn't matter. We are great.
Next. So first of all, thank you so much, Emily, for having me here today. I'm really excited to be here and presenting on a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And when you brought up sustainability and DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, I tried to tie them together. And the best way I could do that was by looking at, I keep quotes, and I had these quotes. So I was looking through all my quotes and I found a couple of quotes. But I think the thing that really tied together, I can't move my slide, sorry. Sorry. The thing that really tied this together for me was that they're both sustainability, diversity, equity, and inclusion. All of these things are the right thing to do. They're all moving us forward, and we apply them to work. And that's really what I want to talk about today. So I want to give you, I'm going to try and figure out my presentation, and I want to give you an overview of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it's scary. And I feel like when I started working in this, I felt that I was being judged often, and I was worried that I was saying the wrong thing all the time. So I want to make sure that I give you some definitions today and take you through some things that are really simple and that can help you make a difference.
So if you go to the bottom right-hand corner of your screen,
yeah,
near to the minus sign, there's like a little projector screen with a little foot at the bottom of it. Just click on that.
Yes, there we are.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Rebecca. But I don't know if it's working.
Going. You might be able to scroll down. It might be a continuous.
Oh, look at that. Okay, but I still can't click on the individual slides. Oh, they are coming up. Okay. Which slide is it on right now for everybody?
We're still on the first one, Evette.
We're still on sustainability. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's see if we can slide down to the next one. It's always something. Yeah, no, it's not working for me.
How about you stop sharing your slide, and I will be sharing from my side.
That would be great. Yeah,
Yes.
if we could do that, that would be amazing. Sorry, everyone.
No worries. All right.
Perfect. Yeah, that takes some of the heat off. Okay, so when I was speaking about the quotes, these are the 2 quotes that I sort of came upon that about sustainability that I thought were sort of tying into diversity, equity, and inclusion. This first one, mind the grammar, and I don't know who wrote it, but it says sustainability is no longer about doing less harm. It's about doing more good. Doing more good is what I believe diversity, equity, and inclusion is too. So that one was really important to me. And the next one is sustainability includes how you run your business. And whoever wrote this said, and my bottom line includes how you treat your people. Sustainability starts with your staff. I want to work for this person. It does. It really matters. And of all the quotes I had, these were the two that really sort of tied this together. So this is where I want to go today. I want to talk about why these things are the right things to do and how sustainability at work will only happen if you really work through including your employees. So we can move on to the next slide. So here are just some basic definitions. Diversity and sustainability, I don't think that's a great definition, but you all have the other information. But the diversity definition is very simple. Unique characteristics and experiences, everything that makes you unique. That's diversity. Equity, having a level playing field so that everyone has the opportunity to succeed. I used to often get equity not inclusion, equity and equality mixed up. And I would say things and it just didn't make sense to me. So I've brought in a diagram for you all to see that I think is going to make this really, really super clear. And inclusion, when employees feel valued for their unique qualities and experience a sense of belonging. This is, I believe, the most important thing we could do for anybody who works for us or with us, is to include them and make them feel like they belong. I won't use this sustainability quote. We can move on to the next one. I wanted to do this activity with everyone, and we won't do it out loud because I think it would be a little early for that. But there's something called othering, which is when we view someone or treat someone in our group as different or alien from ourselves. And I just want everybody to take a second and to think about a time when that happened to you. Because I'd like to have that be the sort of lens you're looking at the rest of this presentation through. So just give you a second to think about that. So for me, the time I believe that I most felt like I was othered at work was when I was part of an executive team that was all male, except for me. And we went to a game and for beers. I didn't care about the game and I didn't want beers. So I was like, is there something else we can do? And was basically told this is what we do. So as the only female on the team, I was sort of left out. And that's a really moderate example. I'm sure we can all think of way worse ones. But I just wanted to give you that example of othering as we go through the rest of the slides. We can move on from there, yeah. So this is a really, I love this diversity slide. It sort of shows that people are like onions, right? We have an identity, which is at the core. But we have this primary layer, and this is what you see. This is our ethnicity, race, gender identity, gender expression, physical, mental ability. And then we have an organizational layer, which is the one we talk about a lot at work: seniority, experience, work location, management status, that sort of thing. We go through that. Our cultural layer, and then our secondary layer. So there's all of these different layers that make up someone's identity. And we can only see some of them. So when people say that we have a diverse organization, and that just, I think often what companies believe is they have a diverse organization because they have people who look different. There's way more to diversity than just the way people look or the way people talk. So we need to really think about that when we're saying our organizations are diverse. We can go on from there. This is the diagram. This is a diagram that changed everything for me. When I used to get confused about equality and equity. Equality is, this whole everybody's equal. Well, that's not true. Everybody's not equal. But if we look at equity, equity recognizes that each person has a different circumstance and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. For me, this is what employers need to do. This is what companies need to do for their people to ensure that people have a level playing field. If I come to work every day in a wheelchair, I am not set up to succeed the same way as someone who isn't, if there isn't equity, if there isn't a difference made for me, we need to change things so that everybody who comes to work has a place to sit that's comfortable, that allows them to deal with the customers the same way, et cetera, et cetera. So this diagram really drove it home for me. Also, I want to point out, if anybody wants any of this information, just get in touch and we'll send you everything in here. It's all for you. Nothing's proprietary. We'll just move through that. Inclusion. This is a thing that means the most to me. What is inclusion? Inclusion is belonging. People belong when others accept, welcome, and value them, no matter what their differences are. Inclusion is where everyone has a seat at the table and an opportunity to be heard. Inclusion is when all people can feel safe, authentic, and be authentic, and fully participate. Inclusion is when we all accept responsibility to do our part to remove the barriers, social, physical. So just like I was talking about in the equity piece there, removing barriers to success for everyone. I really want to talk about everyone having a seat at the table. Important for business owners, entrepreneurs, people who are running companies, to know that just putting a seat at the table for people isn't enough. They have to be heard. So we, often in executives teams, they say, oh, we're inclusive. We have 3 women on our team. Do those women have a voice? Are you actually listening to them? Or are they, and we could get into a whole topic on tokenism. I'm not going to go there, but are they just your token females on your team? All of these things are bigger topics, but just for an overview, this is inclusion in a nutshell. How do DEI and sustainability tie together? So I think I still have lots of time. Do I have lots of time still? Yeah. Okay, great. So the way they tie together for me is there's an organization called the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion, and Michael Bach is the founder. He wrote this book called Birds of All Feathers, and I just did a shameless plug for him. But it is a really great first read on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of the things he does is he goes through the business reasons why, and then he says, but essentially it's the to do. It's true. This is where I think the big tie-in with sustainability is. Sustainability going forward is the only way. We can't just sit back and say it'll fix itself. We have to fix everything. We have to make things better. Same thing with diversity, equity, and inclusion at work. We have to do these things to keep people working for us. We can't just expect that people are going to show up to work anymore and say, hey, yeah, this is where I work and I'm going to stay here for 20, 30 years. That's gone. So what are we doing to keep our people there? Are we including them? Are we making it equitable? Are we listening to what they have to say? Are we making sure that the voice of the person who's the quietest on our team is heard? So the next thing I have written here is one small step tomorrow. What is it? Everybody needs to think about what they're going to do in terms of making equitable, inclusive, diverse workforces. I also did, accessibility is a part of that. But what is the small step for tomorrow? And for me, I think what I want to offer to every single employer is to not make this an HR checkbox activity. I couldn't tell you how often I've been asked to do diversity. You don't do diversity. Diversity is something that happens because you're creating change within the environment. So what is the step you want to take? I would say walking in and taking away the check boxes and setting up a program. You can't just tick a box for any of this. You also can't do that for sustainability. It's change management. There's a lot of change management that goes with this, but it's little things. It's looking at the environment and seeing what's in it. One of the best stories about this I have, and I have to share this story, is that I went into a company that wanted to be more inclusive and more diverse. And I went down on the floor. It was a warehouse, and all of the people were young women, young South Asian women, and they were all, I would say, between 18 and 30. And their start time was 7 to 3. And they punched a clock to get into work. And they lived in an area where they took the bus to work. And they were working for minimum wage. When I went in and talked to them, none of them were really too upset about their wages. None of them were too upset about the work. But what they were upset about is that they didn't get to take their kids to school or take their kids home. pick their kids up at school, but no one had ever asked them why they were late for work, why they were having problems staying. So I went to the manager and I talked to them, the person who was running the floor with them, and said, you know, I think if you move these shifts either to 6 to 2 or 8 to 4, you would see that your issues with people coming to work late or asking for time off would go away really quickly. And I heard all the reasons why they couldn't do it. You know, we can't do it, the other shifts. Eventually talked them into moving all the shifts 1 hour. And 3 months later, when we had this conversation, most of those young women were fine and happy and not going to work late and not having issues because they could actually see their kids off to school or pick them up from school. All that needed to happen there was someone needed to ask the group a question. Someone needed to talk to them about how everything was affecting them at work and give them a sense of belonging. It was incredible to see the change in this workforce. These people that worked there suddenly felt heard, understood, and they built their own little communities around people asking them questions. It was amazing. And I could go on forever about that, but it's these small steps rather than ticking boxes that make big differences when it comes to inclusion at work. And then I said that we all have the ability to make an impact individually, in groups, and at work daily. What will we do? I think that the most important thing everyone can do when they go back to work is to look around you and see what the small things are. When we're talking about accessibility, how does a person who, you know, do we have neurodiverse people in our midst that aren't being, you know, listened to, or are we even looking into what they need differently? People who have physical, you know, differences that need help. Are we even considering those things? I know I've worked for places that just ignore that. It's just better to ignore it. Are we including people in management groups and then not listening to them? Is that something we're doing? You know, these are the little things that we do that we shouldn't be doing, or that we need to change. And I think that it takes these little tiny incremental changes to change an entire workforce and make it a place that people actually feel that sense of belonging. I know that the first time I felt like I belonged at work was when a CEO asked me what I thought, simply saying, "What do you think?" And I was 40. So I had already spent, you know, probably 20 years working with CEOs and things like that. No one had ever asked me what I thought. I was floored. I didn't even know what to say. That was, you know, I mean, that was a while ago. I was the only, you know, I was the only woman. That's changed a lot. You know, that's changed a lot because people stood up and made changes and talked about it. So I think I'll end there. And if there's a couple things that we can talk about before we move on, I would love to answer a question. Again, I just wanted to give you an overview. And I think if the most important thing I said today was diversity and inclusion is not a checkbox activity. I think that's the thing that I want to drive home the most. And that in order to sustain workforces going forward, we need to do this stuff. We need to be inclusive employers. We need to be diverse, that sort of thing. So I'll drop it there. And if anybody has a question, shoot.
Yeah, we'll actually keep the questions to the end of that, but okay. To me, it's bringing a lot. And I know we have like really only a small amount of time for that, but this is really just like the start of a really big conversation. So thank you for like keeping it simple and really driving some good points home. Definitely the checklist. I love that you said that at the end, because even, you know, related to sustainability in general, we see a lot of organizations that are just saying they're doing the things rather than, and then being at the core of what they do. And I love that you're bringing the social sustainability to that same level of responsibility for businesses and organizations. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, it was hard to keep it down to a dull roar, but
I didn't give you a lot of time. Fantastic. All right, so I will be introducing our next speaker. Let me switch my slide. Okay, so we are moving into the wellness topic. So I'm super excited to be welcoming Madalyn and Annie from Wise Bite Wellness. Through one-on-one coaching and corporate workshops, Madalyn and Annie help people unlock their power to bring their body back into balance by identifying specific nutrition and lifestyle habits so they can live with more energy, less stress, and easy digestion. I will stop sharing my screen and I will give you the power to, great.
Thank you, Emily. This is Madalyn. Can you turn my video back on, please?
Yes, my apologies.
Thank you. I was trying to do it myself and it
Yes.
let me.
Sure. I'm trying to look for you. Okay, right here. Fantastic.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, thanks for the introduction, Emily. We are super excited to be here and talking about this important discussion. Hi everyone, I'm Madalyn Baer and I'm calling in from the state's Westminster, Colorado. And then I'll let my business partner also introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Annie. Thanks so much, Madalyn. I'm calling in from Seattle, formerly Duwamish territory. Like Madalyn mentioned, we're so excited to be part of this conversation.
Yeah, sure are. So today, we're going to talk about what Emily had mentioned, things that haven't really been talked about very much. And this is the connection between wellness and sustainability. So we're going to dig into that a little bit more and talk about how self-care fits into that picture. And then we're going to leave you with some action steps and things that you can do in your daily life that compound into bigger change. We usually think that wellness only has to do with the individual, but that's not the case. It's not just about the individual or yourself. It's also about the collective. That wellness is a collective benefit too. So that's one thing that we want to drive home today. So when people feel better, they take care of themselves, they feel healthier, they have more space and energy to do things that are more proactive, they get engaged with their community because they're feeling good, they're able to make that impact. So when you're feeling good, you're not only in your immediate sphere and able to kind of participate more with your family or work, but that also feeds into the bigger picture, like your community and your environment. So when we talk about wellness for the greater good, you might be surprised that it doesn't start with the community effort. So that's what you see here on this slide. You see on the right, at the very end, we have the environment and the community, but it actually begins more on an individual level, all the way to the left. You see the self. So making a difference, doing something bigger than yourself actually begins with you. And another thing that we want to drive home today is that when you think about putting yourself first, that's not selfish. As you can see on that slide, that feeds into the environment, that feeds into something that's bigger than yourself. So I'll let Annie kind of dig a little bit more into that.
Thank you. Yeah, so like Madalyn mentioned, we want to dig into kind of how taking care of yourself adds to this bigger movement. So what is that thread, right? What does it mean when we talk about personal wellness and holistic sustainability? So one concept that really resonates with both Madalyn and I, and that we use in our practice quite a bit with our clients when we're working around behavior change, is this concept, how we do one thing is how we do everything. So how we do one thing is how we do everything. So what this means is that the small habits, the small things that you do kind of during your day or throughout your week, echo across all aspects of your life, often in ways that you don't even realize, or that we don't even realize. So one famous quote that illustrates this is, if you want to change the world, start by making your bed. So the idea here is that if we want to make these big changes, we have to shift our focus to the small choices that we're making every day. So just by getting 1% healthier every day, that 1% compounds to big change over time. And that, like Madalyn will mention, ripples out through the people and the environment around you. So getting back to this concept, how you do one thing is how you do everything. If we are not, for example, compassionate with ourselves, how are we supposed to be sustainably compassionate with our families, or sustainably compassionate with our coworkers, our community, our environment. So I just want you to think about this kind of as you go through your day and through the next week and beyond, starting to pay attention to the little choices that you're making for yourself. Are they, the concept we use is filling up your cup, allowing you to kind of have that energy to put into being a better version of yourself so that you can help better your community and help better your environment? Or are those choices draining your cup, keeping you kind of constantly one step away from having the energy to positively affect both your own life and the people around you?
Yeah, so what Annie's saying is that, everything that we're doing for ourselves is feeding into that greater good. And so at the beginning of the presentation, just moments ago, we were saying that health is a collective benefit, not just an individual one. Meaning that when you're putting yourself as a priority, that's feeding into something bigger. Like, that when you're taking care of yourself and, slowing down, eating good food, moving every day, that builds our health. And when we are healthy, that accumulates all the good things that ripples out. So there's that little image of, water and something dropping in and it ripples out. That affects everything around us, the larger picture. And so when we think about not just the end goal, but where does that start? It doesn't start with the end. It starts with taking care of ourselves so we have that energy. So when we're deciding to do those things that are healthier and happier, those choices are helping us, create more mental space so we can listen to others. So, when we're present with a family member, we're not distracted by the stress that we're in. We're not kind of in this bubble, but we're creating, with that health, we're creating this space to be that good listener, to seeing what someone needs. And just like Evette was saying, she shared that interesting story and amazing story that, someone just asking her what's her opinion, like that can profoundly make a huge difference in someone's life and just their experiences. So when you can create that space, that mental space, to listen to people and just engage with them, being an active listener, that really starts to ripple out. This can also mean a couple other things, like you have a strong body so you can do that volunteer work. So if we're feeling tired and just don't have that energy, it's harder to physically be able to help people. And then lastly, to have that energy to make those sustainable decisions. So we all know about that decision fatigue, right? At the end of the day, it's like, what's for dinner? It's like, I don't know, you pick, because it's a real thing. We're making decisions so many throughout the day that we can get that decision fatigue. So creating those breaks and taking care of ourselves will help us to be able to be more present towards the end of the day. So Annie and I could talk about this for hours. It's a topic that is very high level. We talk a lot about this with our clients for many months, actually, working through self-care and different lifestyle and nutrition tips that help each other. But we just wanted to give some kind of like high level snapshot of, what expands from that benefit of health and wellness.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely true. We could talk about this for a very long time, and often do. We're very passionate about the space, the kind of area of behavior change and how much that can affect somebody's life. Okay, so information is great, but knowing how to use it often better. So the next question is the $1 million question, really. What do we do? How do we take better care of ourselves? Especially when life tends to get in the way. There seems to always be kind of things vying for time, vying for our space and energy. So one place we want to start is to start kind of expanding your idea of what self-care is, right? We hear about self-care a lot these days, and it's so wonderful to see that the movement is kind of, we're moving in the direction of kind of taking care of ourselves as individuals. But one thing we wanted to make sure to kind of talk about today is that self-care is not always just about what I call luxurious. It's not always about taking baths and getting a massage if you're lucky enough to be able to do that. It's about how you are filling up your cup with the things you do during a day. So for instance, if you went to get a massage or to take a bath to practice self-care, but you were still holding on to anxiety, or you were still thinking about the fact that you didn't get any sleep last night, or you were not present, that's not really self-care. So again, it's really about the how. When we talk about filling up your cup, how are you doing things throughout your day to do that? So one of the places, and I get very excited to talk about this stuff because it's been so effective in my own life, but one of the places that we often start is to determine what it is that has to happen for you in a day. Or I guess I could say it differently. What do you need to do for yourself as a baseline to feel healthy, to feel happy, to feel at peace? Whatever it is you're after, whatever it is you need to fill your cup. And we call these things non-negotiables. So these are things that should be prioritized in your life, but often are not, for many reasons, like I mentioned. So I'll give it a personal example. I have a tendency to stay up very late. And the problem with that is that I also work East Coast hours, so I have to be up early. And I know for myself that when I go to bed late, my next day is really challenging. I wake up feeling groggy. I generally have low energy, as you would imagine. Sometimes find myself overeating because I'm tired. So setting a sleep non-negotiable for myself is really, really important, and something I've learned kind of later in my life, but happy that I learned it. But it's super important for me to keep my cup full, to avoid bringing low energy to my coworkers during the day, to my family, allowing me to kind of have more energy to put into my community, to learning about what's going on in the world, and those kinds of things. So I want to kind of introduce a little bit of a framework that we use. There we go. So an easy way to kind of remind yourself of your non-negotiables, or to kind of prioritize those non-negotiables for you, is to use this framework. Today, I will blank, no matter what, because that's what my body needs. So for my personal example, it might sound like, tonight, I will be in bed winding down by 10:15 p.m., no matter what, because that's what my body needs. So I can write this down. I can put this by my bed. I can put this in my kitchen, or probably on my desk. And what it does is it reminds me that I've made a promise to myself, that I've prioritized something really important for myself, and that it is really important, not just to me, but to the others that it might affect.
Yeah, it's a great example, Annie. I think I, for one, also can identify with that one. And I think also the non-negotiable also helps us to focus on one thing at a time. I'm sure we could all write a bucket list of a million things, but when we can just say, okay, for today, I'm going to focus on this one thing, it makes it tiny, and it makes it achievable. And we're focusing on one tiny habit at a time until we get that down, and then we can always move on to the next one. But just really choosing something that's really important. So I'll also share an example that is very important for me. For me, it's around meal timing and breakfast. So for many years, I was pushing out breakfast, and I was noticing that intermittent fasting is good for people, and for some doesn't work. Like for me, I've had, health issues in the past, and dealing with blood sugar issues. I know that, okay, I have this idea that I want to push it out, and I'll just eat when I'm really, really hungry. But when I'm putting my breakfast first, within an hour or so, I can tell a difference of my energy throughout the day. Less crashes, more energy, less cravings, just more present, less irritable in the evening. I know my husband appreciates that. So for me, I make a decision to say, today, I will eat breakfast within 1.5 hours after getting up, no matter what, because that's what my body needs. So the more specific that you make it, the more measurable, the more that you're able to stick to it, because you're kind of putting a time and a place and how much. So that's just a little tip when you're creating your little statement there. I can give lots of other examples, but it doesn't always have to stick with food or sleep. There's a whole different 360 view of your health. It can go into career, relationships, creativity. It really depends on what that non-negotiable is for you. So Annie and I have created this handout that's super helpful. And so if you're interested to kind of work through, it's just a simple 2-pager with like a chart, and it helps you figure out what area in your life that you might need more attention in. There's also a journal prompt. Just go ahead and type yes in the chat box, the Zoom box, and we'll send it out to you.
Wonderful. So we wanted to leave a good amount of time for discussion, especially with the first topic, Evette's topic, and ours as well. But we wanted to kind of leave you with a quote by the author James Clear, which is, "Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become." So kind of going back to, definitely what came up in Evette's presentation, and what we have been really trying to kind of hone in on is this idea that the small choices you make ripple out and affect so many others in your community and the environment. Personal health is a part of the collective health, the health of your community. So just to think about the choices you're making for yourself on a micro level, and how, again, they're either hindering you or enabling you from showing up for your community and your environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Like, such simple things that we sometimes don't prioritize and don't feel like it's necessarily part of the whole picture. And I just thank you very much for bringing it forward and talking about this super important topic. We will be moving into the question period. If you feel like turning on your camera and coming in, you're more than welcome to it. If I have sometimes put you off and you're not able to turn it on, just tell me in the chat and I will make sure to ask you to do your video. So you can ask questions through the chat box if you'd like to type them in, or raise your hand. There's a little function under the participant button at the bottom to raise your hands. But if you don't mind, I will start with a couple of questions. There's definitely a few things that came up on this presentation. I'm going to start with Evette. Considering the region that we live in, when we, I guess backing up, I love your definition of diversity, because we tend to associate it with, I guess, visible minorities, something that people can see from the outside. And I love that you, explain that diversity is about what makes us unique. So when we're talking about a business or an organization perspective that want to have a more diverse group of people, can you give me strategy? How do you seek people that may have uniqueness that, you want to seek it in your team?
Mm-hmm. So I would start with, this is such an HR answer, but I would start with looking at my the hiring policy, the way you hire people. What does it say on your job description? There is a little, there's a line you can put on every single job description that says, we are a diverse and equitable employer, blah, blah, blah. And it's great. And you should do that. But also, what does it say within the job description that makes someone feel like this would be a place that they would belong, right? If I'm thinking about restaurants and bars, that sort of thing, right? What makes me, as someone who in our region, in a predominantly white sort of middle class region, if I'm a BIPOC person, what's going to make me feel like I can work there? What's going to make me feel like I will fit in? Put something in there, not something ridiculous, but just something in there that says, you can write anything in there if it's true. So we are really looking for not tokenism. We're not looking for one person of color to work for us, but what are we looking for? Like, we want to have a more ethnically diverse workforce. So we would like you to come and see us if this works for you. We would like to include more LGBT 2+ folks in our environment. Please tell us how we can do that. Like, we can put these things into our documentation to make people feel welcomed, without making them weird and tokeny.
And I guess the work needs to be done within the organization before putting these types of messages out, to make sure that you have that inclusion piece is already as part of your culture.
Yeah, and it's even in, I've seen job ads that go out there and say, like, they'll have a lot of he's in it, right? Simply changing your he's to they's would be a way forward. Making sure that it doesn't sound like one job description I looked at not too long ago was, we want our people to drive home results. Like, that's 1980s language. We're not driving home results. We're working together in community to do these things. So kind of making sure that you're aware of the fact that we're living in 2022, I think, is the first step in all of this, right, Val?
You just mentioned, you just talked about pronoun. I want us to talk about this. I think in 2022 is something that we don't really know how to approach sometimes. We don't know how to ask people what are their preferred pronoun. Any tips on this? Because I feel like it's so important to nail that, and by not talking about it and not asking how to do that, sometimes we freeze.
Yeah. Probably the most embarrassing situation I've ever been in my life. I was on a Zoom call with a bunch of people, and I kept referring to someone as he. I did it 5 times. It simply said right there. I can't remember what their pronouns were. Anyway, the person did the most gentle and graceful thing I've ever seen. And they said, Evette, read my pronouns again and read them out loud to the group. You're embarrassing both of us. But they said it with this jokey kind of way that they knew they could get away with me. And it made me feel okay about making the mistake. So I was lucky. I got treated with grace. But in most situations, I would say, if you don't know someone's pronoun, simply saying, could you tell me your pronouns, is the right way forward. If you say it wrong, apologizing and then saying it correctly is the way forward. Like getting embarrassed and acting like, the first time I did this. I went, oh yeah, sorry. Did that thing. And the person just felt worse. So taking yourself out of it, apologizing, and reading a little bit about pronouns and why we have them is also really important. It's easy to say that I don't need pronouns. I'm, a cisgender female 50-something-year-old person, but I didn't have to fight my entire life to be recognized for something either. So pronouns are important to many people for many different reasons. So let's be graceful about it and ask the questions and do the hard work around it.
Yeah, educating ourselves is our responsibility. I don't think there's any reason not to look into this, to read, to ask questions. So thank you for prompting us to all do better in that category.
And if I could just say one more thing on that,
Yes.
Sorry, it's really embarrassing to be wrong. And to do, especially when you're working in this, I'm wrong all the time, and I'm okay with that. So know that it's going to be embarrassing. Any kind of change. Remember how embarrassing it was to hit a stop sign when you were learning how to drive a car? Every bit of change or any massive change we're doing in the world is going to be uncomfortable. That's okay.
I have one more question on this topic for you, Evette. And again, feel free, guys, to jump in. Anybody that's on this call that wants to ask a question, feel free to add something in the chat box. So just thinking back about the LGBTQ2+ community, if you see somebody in your environment, at work, in an organization that you're involved with, and Perhaps this person is not necessarily like out, or they might be covering to some level. Like what's ways to approach this and make them feel more comfortable, and create that safe space for them to be who they are.
I would say that if you're going to do that, you should first do the work on how to be an ally. We often walk around the world saying we're allies. I think we need to really look into what that means, and do it correctly. And I wouldn't even want to say how to do that, because I think it's different for each person. And if I were going to do it, I would treat that person as I would anyone else. I would just let them know that I'm there. I can't control how you're feeling, but I can control how I treat you, and I can control the environment I'm willing to be in with you. So if someone's going to say something to you, know that I will say something back to them. I'm not going to let that happen. But I think a lot of work needs to do. Read some things about allies, being an ally. It's really important. Don't just wear this shirt. Do the work.
Do the work.
Yeah.
I love that we're back into like educating yourself. That's really where it starts. Love it. Thank you so much. I do have a question more on the wellness side for Annie and or Madalyn. When we're talking about sustainability, or our head often goes to the environment piece, climate change. It can be a downer. It can feel heavy. We need to be doing a lot better if we're looking at the current situation, looking at news, the pandemic. There has been a lot of fairly heavy topics. Do you have some tips for us more on the mental wellness side to be involved and be informed, and not to now, while creating a balance into our life, to be okay?
Yeah, I think I can jump in, and Madalyn, of course, please add as well. As somebody that has also gone through this kind of as a health and nutrition coach, trying to manage that for myself and clients, it is a challenge. And I think, part of the big challenge is the loss of control, or the loss of this perceived sense of control over anything. I mean, the onslaught of things coming, through the news and during the pandemic, everyone was in a state of overwhelm at some point. It kind of goes back to the, individual first, community, and how can you take care of yourself, be informed, but not overloaded. I remember so many conversations with my mom, who was just constantly watching news, and trying to kind of help her find that boundary of not feeling sick all the time from everything kind of coming in, but understanding like how much information do you need to feel informed so that you can take action, and then setting a boundary for yourself. So just to kind of recap, understanding, the things you can do as an individual. And, when we're talking about sustainability of the environment and climate change, the collective, everything that we're doing as an individual does ripple out. And so thinking about what you can do kind of on that small level, and understanding that it's not so small, that it is, those effects are being felt outside of your own sphere.
Thanks, Annie. Do you have anything to add, Madalyn, on this?
Yeah, I think Annie said that very well. It's just when you are feeling, I think what we're kind of touching upon here is feeling that overwhelm of like, how can I make that difference? How, like, I'm feeling that loss of control. It's usually that loss of control, that confusion. So having those conversations, getting that education, just so you can feel more at peace of like, this is where I am, and, breaking it down of, okay, how can I help in this certain way? But taking the first step, which is, taking care of your mental health. And maybe that means limiting some social media or anything that might be causing stress. So first, taking care of yourself to get your mind right, feeling more at peace. So then you can have those conversations and you can have that energy to make a difference. But it really does start with yourself. And I know that oftentimes that can feel really like you're not doing enough. And it's like, oh, I can't be thinking about me in this situation. But for us to put our best foot forward, if we don't look out for ourselves, who's going to do that for us? Like, we have to do that. I tell that to my husband all the time. I was like, you need to take care of yourself, like, because he's just like spinning, with work, and we get so stressed out. And then, that advice can come from the outside, but it comes from inside of us, that we have to be our own advocate for our own health so we can do those bigger things. So that's kind of what I would say about that.
Right.
I
Thank you,
wanted to add,
Madalyn.
oh,
Yes,
sorry, I
go
just
ahead.
wanted to add one thing too that came up while Madalyn was talking. So I talked a little bit about like loss of control, but I'll just share, a kind of personal experience, my experience through the pandemic. I'm an extremely sensitive person, and I was definitely, still feel overwhelmed. But the word that, or the feeling, the sentiment that I had from them, that I feel often is kind of helpless. And I think that ties into loss of control, but helpless about anything going on in the world. And so what really helped me is to sit down and kind of think about my, again, non-negotiables, and think about what is something that I think I can do for my community that has a big impact. For me, it ended up being, delivering meals during the pandemic. And that, that felt like I was doing something, and it helped get me out of that place of helplessness. It's not changing the world, but it's, it's helping a few people in my community. And then again, that came back to making sure that I had the energy and the ability to be able to kind of physically show up to that space. So yeah, I think it's addressing and naming the helplessness, and then finding for yourself, maybe is there one thing that I can build into my life that helps me feel like I'm contributing in some way.
Yeah, yes, that selflessness is definitely helpful in those moments. I do have one more questions for Annie and Madalyn. I don't see any other questions in the box. We know that one of the main goal, the sustainable development goal, is wellness, well-being for everybody. But even thinking about our environment, our organizations, and our businesses, there's only still a few that are really incorporating that wellness piece as part of their culture. What's your take on this? You do corporate wellness. Like, why do you see that being important, and why should more businesses and organizations really make that a priority in their work culture?
Yeah, I can start with this one. In terms of corporate, if we spend more than half our day, right, at work. And so if you think about it, the company kind of is creating our environment, our space. So they almost have the responsibility to make sure that we're having a livelihood that sustains us, that, we feel we, at least look forward to go in, or, surrounded by people who support us, and, having all the necessities just to have mental health, physical health, because we're spending most of our day there. So it's a really important thing that I think companies, should look at, because like our livelihood is kind of somewhat in their hands in a way, right? Because we're showing up and we're doing work. So it's very like dear to Annie and my heart, because what we get to do is share a lot of like the basics of nutrition, like mental health, bringing that awareness, and hopefully that helps trigger excitement around wellness, and then companies see the effect of what wellness gives to people. People are able to take better care of themselves. They're not missing out days from work. They're not sick as often. They're feeling happier at work. They're making better connections, especially when you think about mental health. And as like the company focuses on wellness, they thrive. And I think today people are seeing that, and especially through the pandemic, how important wellness is. And I think I'm seeing a little bit more of that pop up, especially in the past couple of years, of that importance that we got to take care of the people who we are leaning on to get the job done. And yeah, so I don't know, Annie, if you have any other thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely agree with everything you said. I mean, I think, there's the idea that, happier employers are more productive employees. And yes, that is true. But I think, to Evette's point in her kind of presentation, was that it is just the right thing to do, right? And we're seeing the baseline shift as people's expectations, certainly through the pandemic, of what they need, the time they need for themselves, for their families, as that changes, and we kind of understand like we're needing more here in the space. I also, I think it's about meaning. I think people are more interested. I mean, you see so many people leaving their jobs after the pandemic. And why do you think that is, right? Because people are realizing that there's this deeper sense of meaning that maybe they're lacking. And I think that meaning comes from oftentimes, obviously, what you're doing, but also how you feel while you're doing it. Do you feel like you're part of something? Do you feel like you're part of a team? Do you feel like your company is taking care of you and cares about how you are and how you feel? And I think the more we move forward from the pandemic, the more that's going to be kind of demanded by people that have the privilege of demanding that. But I think it's again, kind of really comes back to simply, it's the right thing to do.
I love this. This is a great way to wrap this up. And I just brought something for me as we're moving more towards like hybrid models and people like working from home. And I wonder how that corporate wellness piece is actually going to play out over the next few years. So maybe we can have another chat about that in the future. I really just want to take time as we conclude this webinar to say thank you to our speakers first. Thank you, Evette, Madalyn, and Annie, for being here, for taking your time and sharing your expertise. And also thank you to all the participants who've also taken time out of their day to show up, to learn. We'll be sharing some more resources in the follow-up email as well. And I just want to take an extra minute to just thank our partners for this event, the Ontario Trillium Foundation, and also Fanshawe College, who partner up with us on this series. There is one more event coming up on May 27th. This one will be more geared toward the economic side of sustainability and a bit of a business focus. So if this connects with you, we would love to see you at the next event. I will send you a link to register sooner than later. And I hope that we can continue this conversation. This is the very beginning. It's a big topic. There's a lot to talk about. Hopefully that's give us a starting point to much more. So thank you and have a beautiful day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.